I guess whilst we're just kind of waiting to get started, I might as well just take you through who myself and Chris are. So I'm Olivier Jenkins. I'm one of the collaboration solution architects working for Agilysys, and I'm effectively responsible for designing, delivering and implementing a number of Power Platform and predominantly SharePoint-based solutions. It's my my sort of background. I'm a big fanatic of obviously Power Platform. It's one of my big passions in life, and it's something that I love kind of geeking out on sort of inside and outside of work. I'm also particularly fond of mechanical puzzles, Rubik's Cubes, and I play bass guitar in a number of different bands, or at least I used to before the pandemic hit. I can't wait for it to all kind of move on so that we can kind of get back on with some of that that sort of stuff. And my esteemed colleague Chris Clegg is joining me today. Sorry guys. It seems to have jibbed me on the slide there, but he is.
I'm not a cat. I'm not a cat.
You're not a cat.
That's awesome.
Sorry, all. Chris.
Yeah, so I'm.
Yourself.
Yeah, cheers, Ollie. I'm Chris Clegg. Also work for Agilysys. I'm a collaboration architect. So yeah, I've been working on the Power Platform for a number of years. At the moment, I'm doing a lot of work around the Centre of Excellence, which is quite interesting. Helping organisations put governance and nurturing pieces in place to get the best out of the Power Platform. Outside of work, I like cycling and hiking. They're my two things that try and keep me fit. And when I get the chance, a bit of poking around with some old cars. So that's been keeping me busy over the pandemic when we haven't been able to get out.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. So just a little bit about our sort of session today. So just to kind of preface this, our session is based on a hack in a day that we did some time ago, back at the end of last year, where we were presented with a challenge to come up with a solution to try and help organizations with the eventual return to work of members of staff who possibly have been working from home or working in remote locations for an extended period of time, and these organizations need to start thinking about ways that they can get people back into the office safely, but also ways that we can sort of monitor and manage kind of what's happening. So our overview basically is to look at the effects of the global pandemic on organizations currently, some of the challenges that they face as a result of that, and then potentially just an overview of what we kind of threw together in effectively a day about what we think can be kind of done. And then we'd like to take you through our solution, which is, as I say, it's Power Platform based. So it's using a combination of various different Power Platform services, and typically we'd use CDS as our sort of back end, but we're going to be using SharePoint just for the purpose of today. And then we'd like to look at some next steps of like ways that we think that we could potentially develop and enhance the solution a little bit further, so that we can kind of get some more mileage out of it. And then lastly, we're going to be looking at just if anyone has any questions, hopefully myself and Chris can kind of address those. There was a third third member of the team as well who helped develop the solution, but unfortunately he's not able to attend today, so it's just myself and Chris. So first off, let's look at the kind of big picture, right? So what's the problem? What's the kind of current scenario? Obviously, at the moment, we've got an unprecedented working condition across the globe, or at least a large number of countries, that's affecting a tremendous number of organizations, and as a result of obviously the global pandemic and COVID-19. Now, the core area of focus, I think, for a lot of those organizations initially and kind of in a sort of sustained effort has been trying to get organizations enabled to work remotely. So it's been all about kind of getting the members of staff either access to the tools, to the equipment, and all of the sort of services that they need in order to perform their jobs, and getting them to work kind of effectively from home. And I would say that for the most part, that's been tremendously successful. There's been significant growth, obviously, in some industries, not least the technology services industries. Agilysys, we've seen a massive boom in terms of organizations who were accelerating their roadmap to try and get onto remote working solutions a lot faster than they would have been previously, and we've actually helped deliver some of those in incredibly sort of truncated timescales. We've also seen potentially better ways of working. Like for a lot of people, I think the current setup of working from home, it can be better. There can be potentially less distractions working in a home environment if you're lucky enough to have a nice secluded kind of office that's away from the rest of the sort of hubbub that's kind of going on in any sort of home. You could potentially have a nicer kind of working environment with less distractions from just the general kind of buzz that's going on around the office. I find myself often when I'm working in the office kind of being distracted by conversations that people are having that either are or aren't work related, and just sort of being kind of drawn into the conversation rather than kind of focusing on what it is that I'm doing. And obviously some people working at home are finding that a much better way of working. Additionally, there's been a better work-life balance. So personally, I spend up to 2 hours a day traveling to and from the office. And obviously that time is now spent, either with my son or with my partner, or doing just things that I enjoy doing more frequently. Obviously, in some cases, that's led to greater productivity, and then obviously a reduction in travel and the associated risks of traveling, given the current situation. And again, for some organisations, that's entered into a kind of new realm really, where they might actually be looking and forecasting about, is this a way that we want to kind of work forward, where we can potentially reduce our operational costs. We don't have to pay for as many desks for people to sit at. That's a huge expense for a lot of organizations, especially those working out of central hubs in London or Manchester or Leeds or any of those big cities around the country. So on the whole, it's been a big sort of success, I think, for a lot of companies. Obviously under the backdrop of this kind of very, very tragic sort of pandemic that's going on. However, that's not the case for every organization. It's not all good. So there are a lot of organizations for which remote working is not ideal. They're really, really struggling to either get themselves up and running because of perhaps legacy kind of technology issues, things that they kind of can't quite yet move away from. There might just be organizations that simply cannot work remotely, at least not to do the vast majority of their jobs. So, just to take an example, there could be surveyors who typically spend a lot of their time out on site surveying, like kind of working areas, vessels, buildings, like all of that kind of stuff that just can't be done remotely, or it potentially could be in the future, but maybe it's just we're not there yet. Additionally, we've had a lot of reports of team culture kind of breaking down, because obviously, you're used to being there with your colleagues, you're used to being able to like kind of chit chat during the day, go out for lunches together, all of that kind of good stuff. And suddenly all of that has been kind of taken away. And people are feeling increasingly more isolated, and they're feeling kind of left, a little bit out from the organization. They're not necessarily kind of in keeping with what's kind of going on. And because we haven't got that kind of that regular day-to-day contact, everyone's pretty much on Teams meetings every single day. You haven't got that kind of general contact with everyone, and you're not sort of being kept kind of apprised of latest developments, perhaps as much as you would normally be. So what's the effect of this? Well, we start to see drops in efficiency. We start to see drops in people's kind of productivity, their effectiveness, because they're not engaged with their organization, they're not engaged with their work, and that's can be quite often a result of kind of lower morale, people becoming sort of disengaged with what's going on. And I think given the sort of, a lot of focus at the moment around kind of people's mental health, and I think that's something that can't really be understated, is that with the backdrop of the pandemic kind of going on all the time, and then this additional kind of isolation coming from, both the lockdowns, but then also from a lot of people doing more remote working, they're starting to kind of become a bit disenfranchised with what's going on, perhaps a bit disengaged with their work. The mental health institutes are seeing a kind of higher level of presenteeism on the increase, which, if you're unfamiliar with that term, it's effectively people who are checking in for work and they're sitting at a desk perhaps, or in their home office. They're kind of, to all intents and purposes, they're at work. However, they're not actually doing anything. They're not really kind of, being involved in what they're actually doing. Kind of doing maybe just enough work to kind of stay under the radar, but not actually really kind of applying themselves, and obviously not enjoying kind of what's happening, and that can be a real kind of real problem. So a lot of organizations, especially for these organizations for which this is all a challenge, they need to think about how they can kind of return to work normally, eventually. So the challenge as we kind of see it is that, we reached out to our own internal HR department, but we've also spoken to HR representatives from other organizations as well, to try and understand like what are the challenges that they see and that they're kind of forecasting as we start to move out of the pandemic, out of the remote working kind of norm that has become, and looking at how we can potentially help them with addressing some of those challenges. So a lot of HR departments, I think, are thinking about identifying, how do they identify problem areas. We kind of know that there's probably a bit of a sort of sentiment challenge, I think, there, and there's a bit of a sort of reluctance perhaps on some parts. Personally speaking, I'm asthmatic, and everything around the kind of pandemic around coronavirus has been a concern to me, and it's something that's sort of given me a great degree of anxiety. And still, currently, the thought of trying to return to work for me is not an exciting prospect, given everything that's going on. We've also got challenges there around potential mixed mode working, where you've got teams who are currently, they're kind of key workers, or they need to be out on site somewhere. But they've got other teammates who are actually still working from home because perhaps they haven't got that need to actually physically be somewhere. And that in itself can present a bit of a problem. Like, it's great that we've all got teams and that we can kind of generally chat to each other at kind of any given moment of any given day. And we can all kind of meet on calls, but perhaps those employees who are actually out in the field perhaps a little bit more, they haven't got that same kind of level of access, and they haven't got that same kind of level of engagement, and they haven't got that sort of maybe they're losing some of that kind of rapport with the teammates because of the kind of mixed mode of working. Additionally, they're talking about, or HR departments are looking at the potential knowledge gaps where people, members of staff aren't really keeping up to date with what's happening within the organization because of the different mixed modes of working again. And again, starting to feel kind of a little bit kind of alienated from the organization. So in addition to all of those kind of challenges that are going on, bubbling away in the background, HR departments also need to start thinking about how that they can engage with staff, perhaps in new ways that they haven't been doing before, try and assist in kind of rebuilding the team cultures, and ultimately try and get people safely kind of back into the local workplace, wherever that happens to be, and whatever kind of form that takes. And we're thinking it would be really useful for HR departments to be able to understand, the trend of people's sentiment over time. So really look at how are people, like take a kind of stock check right now. How are people looking? How are people feeling? Where are people located? Whereabouts are they at the moment? And then we could start to map that out over time and start to see, actually, are we moving in the right direction? Are we getting general like kind of positive sentiments coming out from our staff, or is it kind of taking a nosedive? Are we starting to go downhill? And perhaps tie that back to some of the decisions that we're making as an organization, and start to understand what impact it is that our actions are having on our staff sentiment. Additionally, we want to know where we can kind of direct our attention for troubleshooting. So if we are able to identify specific problems, like we kind of know what the majority of issues might be, but if we can start to really pinpoint where they are, then we can actually start to look at ways that we can kind of fix those problems. Additionally, we want to be able to give staff easy access to information or to help and to guidance. So effectively signposting people, to information that might help them in their decision or in the roadmap to returning to work. So setting their minds at ease, informing them, keeping updated, and hopefully appeasing some of those fears that are kind of bubbling away under the surface. And lastly, we want to look at metrics. So try to understand how our teams are kind of working together. Are they having problems? And to kind of extend that a little bit further, actually looking at contacts. So people who are in an office environment are actually starting to come together. And with that in mind, if we have an issue where we get a coronavirus case flagged, then we could have the tools available to us to actually do a bit of our own kind of contact tracing within the organization, which could be really, really powerful. And then lastly, kind of going back to the first slide about, the pandemic has actually been kind of good for some people. Some people are actually finding themselves more productive and more, happier in the kind of working from home scenario. So maybe we want to take out some of the pain involved in the sort of flexible working request process. So giving HR departments a bit of automation there to try and allow people to request flexible working agreements without as much legwork kind of involved in paperwork and so on. So I mentioned before, our solution is based on Power Platform. So ideally, we'd be looking at a CDS or data first kind of database, because we're going to be using some kind of relational tables. And really, SharePoint isn't kind of ideal for that when you've got multiple kind of lookups to other tables. Obviously, there's performance enhance or performance degradation considerations, but there's also the fact that SharePoint just isn't really a relational database. It's not designed for that. So whilst it might work for kind of small scale solutions, if you start to kind of ramp this up to hundreds or even thousands of members of staff, you're going to have some real kind of performance degradation issues there to kind of consider. So CDS would be the way to go. We're going to be using Power Apps as our front end, because obviously everyone loves Power Apps at the moment, and it's such a nice tool to kind of get into the hands of our users. And we can design apps that look kind of like a native application on a mobile device, but also can be run from the browser, which is fantastic, gives that accessibility. We're also going to be using a bit of Power Virtual Agents just for a bit of sort of Q&A going on. So we've got a kind of bot as part of our solution, which is going to be gathering a bit of information from our members of staff, then committing it back to a data store, which we're going to then use later on for sort of a bit of analysis. And then we've got Power Automate, doing a bit of the automation in the back end, a bit of workflow stuff going on. And then lastly, but not least, we've got Power BI, which obviously we're using just to kind of complete the Power Platform setup. A bit of Power BI dashboards there to kind of get a bit of analysis and a bit of insight into what's kind of happening. So I'm going to go through a demo now quickly. So if I just move across to the right page, if I can find it. Where's it gone? There we go. Okay, so just a little bit of a kind of preface to this. So again, this was not really a kind of finished solution. It's just something that we tried to knock together in the space of a kind of day. And given those kind of time constraints, obviously it's not perfect, and there's ways I think that we probably would have done stuff a little bit differently had we sort of given it a bit more forethought and kind of had more time right at the very beginning of the kind of design and sort of implementation phase and build phase, sorry. But effectively what we wanted to do was give people a really easy way, so a kind of a staff survey, if you like, to query how people were doing on any given day. The idea was to gauge sentiment just on a basis of 3 data points, so negative, neutral, or positive. So they come into the app. The first thing they get presented with is just this little option here, just to select how the day was today. So let's take someone who's pretty happy. They're doing pretty well. So they click on that the little green smiley face there, and the app then asks them, okay, so it's indicated that your experience was generally positive. So whereabouts were you working from today? Because we want to kind of start to understand, are there trends to people's sentiment, and also where they're located? Is there something that's worth looking at there? So we've got 3 potential options here. We've got the home, we've got the office, or we've got the client site. Now the kind of the workflow, if you like, of the app is based on these kind of these selections. So depending on which sentiment the user has selected, and then based on the location they've selected, it will kind of take a different route effectively. So let's just say that they're working from home. They're pretty happy. Move on to the next stage. So we then want to know, like, what's been influencing your members of staff kind of decision to work from any particular location. There can be positive reasons for someone wanting to work in a particular location, or there can be negative reasons for them not wanting to work somewhere else. So to kind of take that a little bit further, obviously I mentioned before about my kind of asthma. So for me, the thought of traveling on a train and then potentially on a tube to get into an office feels not good. It feels like it's potentially putting myself at a greater deal of risk than I feel is perhaps necessary. And so, that's a kind of negative connotations, if you like, of going into the office. The flip side of that is actually, well, I'm pretty happy with working from home as well. Like I say, I get to spend a bit more time with my son and with my partner. So anyway, I'm just going to say here that I prefer my work-life balance with working from home. So we click into here. And then at this point, the app just says, okay, well, you seem pretty happy. Like you've indicated that you've got a positive sentiment, and you've given us a kind of positive response as to why you're sort of electing to work from home. And that's perfectly reasonable. So maybe when we start to move into the kind of, the next phase of the pandemic and our next kind of working environment, maybe we want to give you the ability to actually request a flexible working arrangement from your manager. So it gives them this option. Either they can just close the app, or they can actually click continue. So if they say yes, they want to do that, perfect, job done. Effectively, that sends off a flexible working request. So we're using Power Automate, which is connected to Power Apps. And if I just come over to here, give it a little refresh, we can see that we've got a flow that ran 15 seconds ago. And in that flow, we are just being triggered through Power Apps. We're setting up a bunch of different variables within our solution. And then lastly, we're just sending out an email, which in this instance is going just to me, but obviously it would typically go to the employee's manager with a bunch of details around what has kind of been requested. And if we switch over to Outlook quickly, we can see here, we've got a nice kind of branded email template that's coming out. And that is addressed to the manager, and it's basically just saying, okay, this member of staff has requested wants to submit a request for flexible working. Here's some details about it, and perhaps you want to have a discussion with them to kind of go through the finer details and perhaps agree whether or not that's something that they should be pursuing, and just takes a little bit of the legwork out of the initial kind of steps. So there's a little link here that clicks off to some policy documents for the line manager, so they've got easy access to information that they need in order to then go through with the next kind of step of that request. If we just go back to our app very quickly, let's just say that we had a bad day today, things weren't going so well, and we'll say that we were working perhaps from the office, and we'll just say that we wanted to work from the office because there's too many distractions at home, there's too much noise going on in the background, and we just wanted a bit of peace and quiet. Because I think that's kind of an important factor, is that a lot of people don't have the luxury of an actual discrete working environment in their home. So actually working from home can be a real challenge because you've got multiple people working in the same room, or there's just other kind of distractions there. So at this point, the app comes up saying that you've indicated that you haven't had a very good day and you've been working from the office. We'd love to know a bit more about it. So if you'd be happy to, would you kind of follow through with a bit of a survey? Now, at this point, what we really wanted to do with the app was to have an embedded Power Virtual Agent inside of the application that would then do the sort of chatbot part of this sort of data collection and sort of signposting and routing for the member of staff. However, we couldn't get Power Virtual Agents embedded in Power Apps. It's not currently yet supported, but there is a way around it. So right now, what I'm going to do is just hand over to Chris, who's going to take us through the next part of our solution, which is effectively the Power Virtual Agent. So Chris, my man, over to you.
Cheers, Ollie, thanks for that. So just kind of touching on what Ollie said earlier, this was a hack in a day that we did, and we thought, a good way perhaps of recording some of these challenges that users are facing in their work environment could be to use a bot. One of the reasons for doing that might be that, with a bot, you can ask a number of questions, and I'll go on to a demo in a little bit and show you what we put together. But at a high level, you can ask a couple of questions, and then based on those answers that you get from the user, you can then follow a kind of path of logic and decide whether it's right to perhaps record the challenge. In this case, we're using a SharePoint list where we're recording what the actual problem is that the user had, and that feeds back into the next part where we're using Power BI to analyze some of these challenges. But also with a bot, you can on the fly you can signpost users off to useful documents. So if they are telling you that they've got problems with Teams, for instance, that the Teams isn't working properly, you might want to link them out to a document that gives them some training on Teams or some troubleshooting guides. You could even go as far as linking this up with a support desk bot. So if someone does have a particularly bad problem with some equipment, they can you can hand them off to a like a support desk bot, which could then log a ticket for them. So there's many ways that kind of you can use a bot. Now in this case, the scope of the bot was purely just to ask some questions about the challenge that the person had, because they've indicated in the previous app that they had an issue, and then record some of that information and perhaps give them some links. So I'll take you through kind of what makes up the solution. We have a SharePoint list where we're storing what these challenges are. Then we've got a bot which I will demo, and I think I've got it open here. Just give me a second. Yeah. So I'll kind of just run you through this. So someone may just say, I had trouble with Teams. Okay, can't find out what that said. Let's say I had a problem. Okay, now we're using Teams in a web setting, so we don't have single sign-on turned on. There's something you can turn on, but in our case we don't have it turned on. So I just have to do a validation, which is just pasting my validation code into the bot, and that will log me in. Okay, so it's asking me, tell me about the challenge you faced today, and the bot's going to try and help. So, I can say I had trouble contacting. Colin on Teams, for instance. So the bot is going to read my answer in, and it recognizes that I'm having some trouble with Teams, that this is a challenge. It's then asking me, it needs some more information about the challenge that I faced. So it's going to ask me when I had this challenge, and this information will end up back in our list of challenges. So we're going to record the date, and the point of, like I said earlier, the point of recording this information is so that we can then run some reports and hopefully find some trends perhaps that we can then address. So we're asking when the challenge was, and the beauty of the virtual agent is that you can interact with it in a couple of different ways. So I can put in a date such as 19th of the 2nd, it'll recognize that. I can put in yesterday's date. I can type in just yesterday, and the natural language processing that's already part of the virtual assistant recognizes that, and it interprets your answer. So let's just put yesterday. Okay. Then the bot comes back to me with another question. It says, okay, please select an option that best describes the challenge you're facing. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to categorize some of these challenges so that we had meaningful buckets of challenges essentially that we could pivot off. And again, you'll see how this works in the reporting in a little bit. So we've asked the user to select a type of challenge, if you like. So in this case, what was it? I had trouble meeting with my colleague, so I'll select that. Then, okay, so at this point it's recognized that I'm having trouble with a colleague, and it's going to ask me some questions about that. So who was I having trouble with? So I think it was Colin. So let's put in I think it was Colin, so I can put his name in. And just by free text typing, what we're doing in the back end, and I will go through the solution in a minute, but we're firing off a flow that's doing a search, an Office 365 directory search for the string Colin Ben. So this is just pulling back the first record from that search. Now, if it pulled back the wrong Colin Ben, because I recognise now that actually his email address is wrong, I can click no and put another person in, type another person in. But in this case, let's just say it is Colin. So I've selected yes. Okay, then at that point, it's telling me, okay, it's logged my challenge with the team. Someone from the team will be in touch. So this is all just predefined text that you'll see we can set up in the settings. And then we may want to signpost them out to some links that are based on the answers that I've given. So where I've put sort of 1, 2, 3 here, these are just sort of placeholders for links that you could put in. So that's kind of a demo of how you could use a bot to capture this information. And there we go. This was the item that I've just added. So let's have a quick look then at the settings of the bot. And there's quite a lot to kind of take in. So I'm not going to go through everything, but I'll kind of run through the main parts of the solution. So within a bot, so we've created a new bot and we've just called it Helper Bot. Again, how you decide which bots you create, what names they have, that's kind of something that needs a bit of thought. We've just called it Helper Bot because it's generic, but you might want to call this, I don't know, the COVID Helper Bot or the working from home Helper Bot, whatever. Now, within the bot, you've got a number of topics. Some of these are included and always on, and these provide so each topic essentially is a list of phrases that the bot can understand and successfully reply to. So, for instance, if we have a quick look at the greeting one, which is built in, if we look into that topic, you'll see here that it's going to recognise all of these different trigger phrases. And in the background, the bot actually does learn as well, using natural language processing. It learns other phrases that it can respond to. So in our case, what we've done is we're using all the existing topics, and we've added our own topic called challenges. So this is specifically around us capturing information that we can then put in this list. So if I click on that, what you'll see is that we have a number of trigger phrases. So these are phrases that I've put in. I've only put 6 in. You can add as many as you like. I'm not sure there will be a hard limit. I'm not sure what that is, but it will learn as the bot kind of is used. How to respond to these phrases. So these phrases trigger this bot to use this topic essentially. So if you had another topic called let's think I don't know, lunchtime recommendations or something like that, I don't know, that would have its own set of trigger phrases that would then trigger the logic in that bot. So you can have as many topics as you like that would then get triggered, and once that topic gets triggered, the bot then stays within that topic. So you have to give it a number of phrases. Then if we go into the authoring canvas, and this is where we apply the logic to the bot. Okay, so what you'll see is that in a similar way how you would create a flow or a Power Automate, it's a number of actions and objects that you can create in a flow basically. So it automatically creates the first one, which is the trigger phrases that it's listening for. And these are the phrases that we put in the last screen. Then here we've just got a simple message saying, I can help. Then we're then asking the user to authenticate. So as I mentioned earlier, we're not using single sign-on, but you can use single sign-on, and it will automatically log the user in. The point of that is that it then has some context of the user that's using the bot. So automatically gives you these 4 variables for: is the user logged in, the authentication token, the username and user ID. So you can use that to then drive things like, who's logged this particular challenge, and we automatically have the user because they're logged in. So yeah, there's a couple of different ways you can set up how the user authenticates. I'm not going to go into that now because it's sort of a topic on its own, really. But needless to say, you can have the user authenticate, or you can have a bot that is not authenticated. So it's not, if you're not going to be capturing any information about the user, you may not want to authenticate the user. If it's just giving advice, for instance, the bot's just responding to questions and giving out advice. But in this case, we do want to capture this information to put in our list. So we are. So I'll skip down. So if the user's logged in, essentially we branch out here. If the user's logged in, we tell them they're logged in, and then we just ask a simple question. What was the challenge that you faced? And in this instance, we're just using a text field, so a free text field. And the point of that is that we want to capture the full text, the first thing that the user types in, because when we're analysing this afterwards, it might be important that we go back and look at what they actually said in their full text, as opposed to just capturing what the challenge type is. It doesn't really give us, it gives us less information if we actually capture the full sentence that the user used to describe their challenge. Then we can do something with that. So that's what we're doing. Then we give them a little message, say thank you, and then when did you face this challenge? So as you saw earlier, this is just a question to say, yeah, when did you have this challenge? And again, you'll see that this goes into the challenge column there. We then move on to the next question, which asks them essentially to categorize what their challenge is. So this is to give us, a consistent categorization of what these challenges are. And we had a day to kind of run through this. So this is not like an exhaustive list or even in any way a finished product, but this is just to give you an idea of how you could set something like this up. You're going to want to put some more thought into what these what these categories are, and do a bit more planning, and hopefully you'll have more than a day to do that if you do decide to do something like this. So we've chosen 4 categories. Primarily, you had a problem with some tools or equipment. You had a problem with your communication tools. So things that when people are working from home, what are the likely things that people are going to be having challenges with, basically. I couldn't meet with a colleague for some reason, or couldn't contact a colleague. So this then branches out into 4 paths. So if I just zoom out a little bit here, so you'll see we've got the first one, which is you had a problem with tools and equipment. Now, in this particular example, we're just going to end the conversation there. But what we would do potentially for tools and equipment is we would then signpost the user to to some resources. So we can put in here some hyperlinks to specific resources that might be related to the tools. We could even ask them another question to be more specific about what tools they're having trouble with, and then do a search. So we could use a flow to search, a user base, or not user base, like a knowledge base, and provide links back to the user. So there's lots of scope for things you can do, within these kind of branches. Now, the one that we've kind of chosen to highlight here, which is the, you couldn't meet with a colleague. What we're doing in this branch here is that we're then going to ask a question. So you would have seen, who is it that you're having trouble meeting with, and within the virtual agent, what you can do is you can select a sort of variable type, and what this does is it's not your traditional kind of variable type where it's a string or a Boolean, although they are available. It also, there's one that we're using for person, which if we look at that, it's a person's partial or full name extracted as a string. So it'll try and interpret what you type in as a person's name, and it may ask you a follow-up question if it doesn't recognise that it's a person's name that you're trying to input. So these are really useful things, and they help the bot get the type of information that you're requesting from the user. Basically, in this case, we want a person's name. So then what we're doing is we're then going to do a lookup using a flow. So typically, how these virtual assistants work is that when you want to go and find some information that's not within the bot itself, you use a flow, okay? And you can create as many flows as you like that are linked to the bot. So in this case, we've got two, one which is to do the user lookup, and one which is to go and actually create the concern or the challenge, which actually puts the data into the list. But you can create any number of flows that go and do various things, and that's typically how you'll get information, or you'll put information outside of the bot, and you'll gather information from outside of the bot using these flows. And we'll have a look in a minute at the user lookup flow. So in fact, let's click on that now. Let's have a look at this user lookup flow. So if I just do a quick edit, what you'll see, the first thing we have to do is specify a number of input variables. So this is basically, what are we sending to the flow from the bot? Okay, in this case, we're sending something called name input. Then, quite simply, in this flow, what we're going to do is just do a search for the user using the search for users connector. We're then going to put the name and the email into two variables. We're then going to take the first record that the connector returns, and then we're going to pass that back to the bot. But what we're actually going to pass back is the name and the email. We could add any number of additional, variables with other information about the user. So there's plenty of stuff that you can add. If we have a quick look in here, you'll see what we can add. We've got all of these. We've got all of these built-in variables from the connector that we can use to send back. But in this case, we're just sending back the name and the email. Okay. Then going back to the bot. Let's have a look. Yeah. So we've got our name and our email output, and yeah. So and then we're then going to just ask another question to say, is this the right person that you've selected? Because we're returning the first result. It's possible that there's 2 or 3 Colin Benns in an organization, and we want to make sure that it's the right Colin Ben. So if it is, then what we do is we check basically that they've said yes, that it is the right Colin Ben. We then, if I lost my track here, where are we going? User lookup. Yeah, sorry. So I was over on the right-hand side there. There's two paths that are doing very similar things. I'll follow the one on the left. So we've found our Colin Ben. We've confirmed with the user that it's the correct Colin Ben. And then what we're going to do is simply call another flow called create concern. And this flow simply then just passes out the variables into, in fact, I'll open it up so you can see it. Okay, it passes out those variables that we've captured. So the full text of the challenge, the date, the challenge type that we captured, who the challenge was with, and who logged it, and then we create an item in SharePoint. So simple as that. Then we pass back a message to the user to say thank you. We've successfully logged your request, and again here we could add some signposts to some relevant information, or we could pass this off to another flow to go and do a search of a knowledge base or something like that. There's endless kind of endless options of things you can do, but that's in a nutshell. It then ends the conversation. So it's a basic bot, but relatively powerful, and hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of this probably took about an hour or 2 hours just to sit there and go through, and it's very interactive. It's very interactive to use. If you're familiar with Power Automate, I think you won't have any problem setting up the logic in the bot. So with that, I think I've covered that to death now. It took a bit longer than before, so I'll hand back over to Oliver, who's gonna talk us through how we might look at this list of challenges, using some tools like Power BI and we can talk about some of the things that we wish we had more time to have done to make it more feature rich. So with that, back to you, Ollie.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Chris. So I realize we're probably running a little bit short on time. So just very quickly, I wanted to show you the Power BI report that we kind of produced off the back of this. And the first thing we wanted to look at really was the challenges that Chris is capturing there as part of his bot. And it starts to give us a map of what's happening within the organization. Now, obviously, for this, we used people, but you would probably want to use like teams of people rather than down to an individual level. But we can start to see quite quickly, so the weight of the line between people and the direction of the line shows the issue that's been raised by the person and who it's with, or with the team that it's with. And then also it gives you a description of the type of challenge that's been faced, and the weight of the line gives you the frequency of that challenge. So you can start to see very quickly if there are particular teams that are having issues within the organization, and also what type of issue it is that they're encountering. And of course, we can filter using all of the great Power BI stuff available at our fingertips. The last thing I wanted to show quickly was just the sentiment analysis. So as we were going through the application, we were capturing people's sentiment, and over time we can start to build up a picture that here we've got obviously a bit of negative sentiment at the start of the week, and as we work through the week, that slowly decreases and increases in its place is some nice positive sentiment that's coming out. We can also start to see the build up of people. So if we slide through a bit of time here, we can see the number of workers either in the office or at home starts to increase, and hopefully we start to see the kind of positive attributes and positive sentiment coming off the back of that as well. So yeah, thank you very much. We'll just quickly go back to the slide deck, which is just, which one is it? That one there. So we're just talking about what we wanted to do next. Obviously, we wanted to embed the virtual agent into the Power App and enhance that virtual agent a little bit more to have additional topics for it to cover. We'd like to expand the data model a bit more to see a bit more reporting in there. And obviously, we'd like to expand the reporting so that we get things like the contact tracing, for example, would be a really great thing using that exact same graph that we have there, or the same visual that we've got there in Power BI. So lastly, I guess it's just, does anyone have any questions for us?
Yeah, I have a question for Oliver. What was that network force diagram? I'm also on the YouTube channel, so you may have said I missed it. Before the ribbon visual, you actually had what looked like a force diagram with the people's names. What visual is that?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of it, but I'll dig that out and send that on if that's okay.
It's really cool looking. I've used network force diagrams that look like that, but yours is a lot better looking. So yeah, I would love to know it. And this is Chuck, by the way.
It is very cool because you've got so the individual nodes between the contact points. You can pick up images off the web and stuff like that you can just put into the report. It's really, really awesome. Just something that we got from the from the Power BI store. So I'll dig out the name for it and send it across to you.
If you could,
thank you very much.
I'm sure several other people would like to see that one too. So if you can look it up and pop it in the chat today, that'd be really handy.
Will do.
Thanks, Ollie. Again, brilliant session. Thank you so much for the time. one.